In 1999, Egypt came under the structural reforms regime of the World Bank and IMF. But for some reason, they didn't push it. Maybe because the ministers of that time were a little smarter. 2004, Mubarak sacks most of his cabinet, brings in guys trained. Where else? Land of the free, home of the brave. Brings them in, and they ruthlessly implement the economic reforms. And you've got chaos. You've got 80% of those below 30, 35 unemployed. Yeah, so democracy is a very important issue. Unlike in other countries, unlike in, say, India, they did not have the option of voting out governments. Please know this, just so that you understand this, how important the food issue is. Election after election in India, many elections in India, I can't even count for you how many, the price of bread has been the price of power. In 2009 elections, all those governments that provided cheaper rice to their public won those elections, whether the BJP in Chhattisgarh and Madhya Pradesh, BJD in Orissa under Naveen Patnaik, the DMK in Tamil Nadu. It made a huge difference because the public were reeling under food prices. Understand how important. In Egypt or Yemen, the public did not have the option of using the electoral route of protest. So yes, the democracy thing was an important driver, but incredibly important was the food issue. Here we are. Let's take each one of these countries. So I've given you the Egyptian stats. In the 6 years between 2004 and 2010, the rate of accumulation and concentration of wealth in Egypt is even much higher than between 1999 and 2004. There's an inequality is the theme. The deepening inequality is a huge driver. And we'll come to the United States soon. Egypt is the world's biggest importer of wheat. Take Yemen. According to the World Food Program, Yemen is, by the way, one of the very poor countries of the world. 15.7% of Yemen's population lives on less than $1 a day. 43% live on less than $2 a day. And in 3 months this year, in 3 months of 2011, 6% of Yemen's population went below the poverty line, driven by food prices and drought. Are we beginning to get the idea that food matters? 6% of Yemen's entire population in the first 3 months of this year, January, February, March. That's the estimate of the World Food Program, which has declared they are broke because the budget that they had made for Yemen was destroyed by the price rise. They had a very large budget for Yemen and now estimate they are $28 million short. Those $28 million measure for you the rise in food prices. So they're saying we're going to have to drop from our list more than 300,000 hungry people. If we are to continue in the same budget. Let's get to Syria. You know, President Assad, drew a quick lesson from what was happening in Egypt, drew a quick lesson from what was happening in Tunisia, and immediately declared that he would bring down the prices of the staples. But you know what? It didn't work. The crowds are getting bigger. But it's interesting to me that he recognized it, as always, too late. Mubarak also, too late. In Yemen, it did not start with Twitter or Facebook. It started in the south with a bunch of students bringing out a public declaration against high food prices. School students, high school students, took out a protest against, and they were astonished by the number of people who joined them. When they went out because their canteen, their meals in the school, everything was cut by these extremely high prices. That's so much for Yemen. Take, in Syria, immediately after the crisis started, Syria lowered taxes on olive oil by 53%, on taxes on sugar by 25%, lowered taxes across the board on foodstuffs but the price increase is so high that it's not having that much of an impact. In fact, the announcement that they would do it led to rapid hoarding and speculation of food grain, and that has also bitten into the crisis very severely. The Food and Agriculture Organization estimates that in the year 2008, 64 million people went below the poverty line driven by food prices. The FAO has a food insecurity atlas that you can look at. 2008 was 64 million people. When they bring out their 2011 issue, you will find that it was exceeded in 2010 because much, much greater stress on prices came up in 2010. Here's an interesting thing. As always, after the horse has bolted the stable, the IMF comes out with a study saying that there is a serious link between food prices and political unrest. Gee, we needed to know that. And only the IMF could tell us. They did a study between 1970 and 2007, which said that a 10% increase, I haven't quite understood it. It's very written in the jargon of the economists. But what it basically says is that it adds a factor of 0.5 in a given year, in the next year of raising the prices in political unrest. In terms of the average political unrest, that's an increase of 100%. That's basically what they're trying to say, is what I understand. Often, this seems to unfold against not just food price increase, but double-digit inflation overall. In India, food price inflation has been ranging between 13 and 18% for the last year and a half. And overall inflation has been close to double-digit, but it's up and down within a band of 2%. Now let's take a look at my favorite magazine and website, Forbes. Was all this an issue of demand and supply? Was all this chaos over riots and food, was it entirely an issue of demand and supply? Yes, those were factors. The collapse of the Russian harvest, the drought in Australia had an impact, but nothing like the impact that speculation in food commodities is having on world food prices. Do you remember in 2008, the price of petrol went up from $40 a barrel to $170 a barrel, then came down to $120. Production didn't change so fast, did it? The food prices, you remember, shot up in 2008, and towards the end of 2008, fell dramatically. Why does that happen? It's called futures trading. It's called speculation in food grain. The difference about speculating in food, you see, now some of the wealthiest investors, I've got to read you quotes from the Wall Street Journal on this. What are they? They're not even acquiring a physical commodity. They're not acquiring so many tons of rice. They're just betting on the price of rice. They're just betting, and they have a very simple bet. Food price goes up. So it's driving the prices of food way beyond what the public of many, many nations can afford. That's what's happening. Okay? So it's really going dramatically up, and Fortune advises its investors that, it says this is an industry, this is a bet worth dipping into. It's going up. So I looked at, today I looked at Fortune's list of fastest growing industries in 2009. What was number one? Food production. Fastest growing in revenues, food production. Number two is energy, number three is petroleum refining, but number one is food production. In the top 20, there are two other food processing is in the top 15, and another food related item is in the top 20, but food production is the number one in revenues, and in terms of growth in profits, the fourth most profitable industry in the world, according to Fortune 500, whom I trust implicitly because they tell me correctly how many billionaires we have each year. And it's Fortune's 2009 results are very important in a way they tell us what happens and what follows in 2010. When we look at those numbers today, we get a much better understanding of the food crisis. Here are some of the biggest beneficiaries of that boom. Number one company in the world profiting from the largest expansion, number one industry in the world, and the fourth highest profit-making industry in the world is Archer Daniels Midland, ADM. Okay? If you look at it in terms of percentage change in profits, the food industry, 2008-09, 48% increase, or 42.8% increase. The next highest is some 14% behind, and that's energy, right? Here's how Archer Daniels Midland, an American company, did. I'm quoting from Wall Street Journal. It not only reported record third quarter profits and windfall profits as all other food companies, including Monsanto, did in the seed sector, but Archer Daniels Midland's profits included a 7-fold increase, a net increase in its unit that stores, transports, and trades in grain, not produces grain. The highest profits were in the units in those companies storing grain. You can then enhance speculation. You're not producing one morsel of grain. You are trading in it, you're hoarding in it, you're speculating in it, you're storing it, and that unit has the highest profits of the fastest growing industry in the world. Tells you how important food is. Welcome to the ultimate profit zone. I'm surprised Warren hasn't found it yet. Or maybe he has investments we don't know about. It's called food and water. You know, if the world has to do without petroleum, it will. Humanity lived without it for millennia. But you can't live without food and water. The countries that control food grain in the next 20 years will run the world. The companies that control food grain or the food grain trade, they have the world by its belly. It's literally having the world by its belly. Now, if that was Archer Daniels' profits, I won't go into the whole list. The profits became so much that the United States Senate set up a commission, what was it called? The Commodity Futures Trading Commission. It held a session in Washington with congressmen participating, I think, because of the kind of damage it was doing. And today, the point of it is that hedge funds and index funds control between an estimated 50 to 60% of wheat traded on the world's largest commodity markets. So hedge funds and index funds are driving food prices. In India, the volume of futures trade, it's not possible to calculate how many percent it has increased in 18 to 24 months. The percentage and the level at which it has increased in a very, very, very brief time. So that's what's happening. Oh, by the way, the food production increase, the industry, I said 42.8, I'm wrong, it's 48.8%. Now the fast-growing investment is moving to another area, farmland. How many of the Indians sitting in this, or people of Indian origin sitting in this audience, are aware that India is buying vast tracts of farmland in Kenya and Ethiopia? Are you aware of this? Yeah. 2 people. Not bad. That's about the national average. Okay? We are locked in a race with China, and we are damned irritated because they've bought more land than us. And what are we buying this land for? To grow food in India. Having destroyed India's food production capabilities over 20 years of neoliberal economics. And we're going to be buying hundreds of thousands of acres. We've invested $4.3 billion in Ethiopia as a country. We're going to be buying tens of thousands of acres of farmland in Ethiopia. God's sake, don't you think they have enough problems without us landing up there?